There is a subtle voice inside you, a restless chatter that often goes unnoticed. It is the voice of the ego, the endless storyteller that defines who you think you are, who you want to be, and who you fear to become. This egoic mind is the architect of your suffering, the source of your inner conflict, and the veil that separates you from the peace that lies beyond. To transcend the ego is not to fight it or push it away. It is to become aware of it, to see it clearly as what it truly is, a mental construct, an illusion of separateness. The ego thrives on identification with your thoughts, your possessions, your status, your pain, and even your joy. But none of these can bring lasting fulfillment because they are all fleeting, transient. The ego is not who you truly are. It is a subtle, persistent voice inside that convinces you that your identity is tied to your thoughts, your memories, your roles, and your possessions. This voice creates a sense of I and mine that feels very real, yet it is essentially an illusion, a story your mind tells you again and again. This story creates a boundary between you and the world, making you feel separate, isolated, and often incomplete. From early childhood, the ego begins to form as you start to define yourself through what you think and what you have. You may identify as a student, a professional, a parent, or a friend. You attach to certain qualities, your intelligence, your talents, your successes, and reject others. You begin to see yourself through the lens of comparison, judgment, and desire. I am better than this person, or I am not good enough. These judgments feed the ego's sense of self, but they also cause inner turmoil and insecurity. The ego thrives on identification. It clings tightly to labels and stories because it fears dissolution. Without these markers, it fears it will disappear, leaving a sense of emptiness or loss. But what the ego mistakes for identity is merely a collection of thoughts, memories, and experiences, passing phenomena that arise and fade like clouds moving across the sky. When you observe your thoughts closely, you realize that many of them are repetitive, reactive, and based on assumptions or fears. The ego's thoughts revolve around survival, status, and approval. It constantly compares, evaluates, and defends. It resists what is by insisting on what should be. This creates a cycle of tension and dissatisfaction because the ego is always chasing something outside of itself: recognition, success, possessions, believing these will finally secure its existence. However, these external things are impermanent. Success today may fade tomorrow. Praise and approval from others are never guaranteed or lasting. When the ego's foundations are so unstable, it leads to anxiety and insecurity masked as ambition or pride. The more you feed the ego with identification, the more it demands, and the more restless it becomes. The ego also thrives on separation. It constructs a sense of me versus them, or mine versus yours. This duality creates conflict, competition, and isolation. The ego's need to be right, to dominate, or to protect itself often leads to behaviors that harm relationships and disconnect you from others. Yet beneath this separation is a shared humanity and interconnectedness that the ego tries to obscure. This illusion of separateness is why true peace and fulfillment seem elusive. When you believe you are a fragmented self, defined by your story and your possessions, you constantly seek to fill a void that can never be filled by the ego alone. The ego's hunger is insatiable because it is trying to compensate for a fundamental sense of incompleteness. Recognizing the ego as an illusion does not mean denying the thoughts or experiences it presents. Rather, it means seeing them as what they are, transient mental forms rather than absolute truths. You begin to observe the ego without becoming entangled in it. You notice the stories it tells, but you do not believe them blindly. You become a witness to the ego's activity instead of its prisoner. This shift from identification to observation is profound. It reveals a space beyond the ego where there is no need to prove anything or defend any identity. This space is not empty or void. It is alive with presence and awareness. It is the true essence of who you are, unchanging, silent, and free. The ego's power lies in your unconscious belief that you are the thinker of your thoughts, the owner of your story. When you bring conscious awareness to this belief, it begins to loosen its grip. The more you awaken to the presence behind the mind, the less the ego can dictate your sense of self. In this awakened state, thoughts come and go like waves on the surface of the ocean, but you remain the still, deep ocean itself. The ego stories lose their hold because they no longer define your existence. You see that you are not the fragmented, the ego claims to be, but the vast awareness in which all experience arises and passes. This realization is not merely intellectual. It is a felt experience, a shift in how you relate to yourself and the world. When you no longer identify with the ego's voice, you become free to experience life more fully, without the filters of judgment, fear, or need. You begin to live from a place of authenticity and presence, where true peace and fulfillment emerge naturally. True awareness arises the moment you begin to see that you are not your mind. For most of life, you have been conditioned to identify completely with your thoughts. You believe that the endless mental commentary running through your head is who you are. The voice that narrates your experience, judges your worth, plans your future, and remembers your past. But when you take a step back and observe the mind with some distance, you begin to realize that this voice is simply a stream of thoughts, not the essence of your being. The mind is a useful tool. It helps you solve problems, create, remember, and navigate the complexities of life. But it is limited in its scope. It tends to be repetitive, mechanical, and often dominated by fears, doubts, and desires. It thrives on comparison and judgment. It often drags you into the past or projects you anxiously into the future, distracting you from the present moment, which is the only true reality. When you recognize that you are not the thoughts themselves, you create a space of awareness between and the mind. This space is the doorway to true presence. It is like watching clouds pass in the sky. The clouds are the thoughts, and you are the vast open sky in which they appear and disappear. You are the observer, the witness. This witnessing presence is what true awareness is. This shift from identification with the mind to observing the mind as an object happens gradually, but it can also occur suddenly in moments of deep stillness or insight. When it happens, you realize that thoughts are not inherently you, they are simply phenomena arising in consciousness. They come and go, often without your conscious invitation, and they do not define your true nature. In this realization, you experience a profound freedom. The constant mental noise loses its grip. You become less reactive to the content of your thoughts, whether they are worries, regrets, plans, or judgments. Instead of being swept away by them, you watch them with curiosity and detachment. This detachment is not cold or dismissive. It is a gentle acknowledgement that thoughts are temporary forms within your awareness. As you deepen into this awareness, you discover a silence beneath the mind's activity. This silence is not empty, but filled with peace, aliveness, and presence. It is the essence of your being, the unchanging background against which all mental activity takes place. It is from this space that true insight and clarity arise, because the noise of compulsive thinking no longer obscures your perception. Living identified with the mind can create a sense of fragmentation. You are caught in a constant inner dialogue that pulls you in multiple directions. You lose touch with the simplicity of being here now, but when awareness awakens, it unifies your experience. You become whole, grounded in the present moment, and free from the endless fluctuations of the mind. This awakening to awareness also transforms your relationship with emotions. Emotions often arise from thoughts and the stories the mind tells about life. When you observe your thoughts and recognize that you are not those thoughts, you also create space around your emotions. You no longer react impulsively or become overwhelmed by them. Instead, you can feel them fully and let them pass without attachment. The practice of witnessing your mind can begin anywhere and at any time. It may start with simply noticing when your thoughts dominate your attention or when you feel caught in a mental pattern. Bringing gentle curiosity to these moments without judgment or frustration is key. Over time, this practice deepens, and the sense of I, as the thinker, begins to dissolve. You realize that the I you believed yourself to be, the one defined by thoughts, memories, and plans, is a limited construct. The real I is the awareness in which all these experiences arise. It is vast, timeless, and ever-present. This awareness is your true identity, the essence beyond the mind's fluctuations. When this truth settles in, your experience of life changes. You no longer live from a place of constant mental activity and restlessness, but from a calm, grounded presence. This presence brings a clarity that allows you to respond to life rather than react. It opens a doorway to peace that does not depend on circumstances, but comes from within. Lasting fulfillment does not come from achieving more or accumulating possessions. It does not arise from external success or approval, no matter how much society tells us otherwise. True fulfillment is born in presence, the conscious awareness of the now, free from the compulsive need to seek happiness outside of ourselves. The mind is conditioned to believe that fulfillment is found in the next accomplishment, the next goal reached, the next possession acquired. Yet this pursuit often leads to an endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction because external things are transient and cannot fill the deeper longing within. When you find yourself fully present, completely awake to the moment, a profound sense of contentment arises that is not dependent on circumstances. Presence is the state of being aware without judgment, without resistance, simply allowing what is to be as it is. In this state, you are not caught in the past regrets or future anxieties. You are fully connected with life as it unfolds. This connection brings a peace that external achievements can never provide. The ego is invested in the idea that you must constantly do and become more to prove your worth. It convinces you that only when you reach a certain level of success or possess certain things will you finally feel fulfilled. This belief traps you in a cycle of chasing after what is always just out of reach. Yet the very act of chasing suggests a lack, a sense of incompleteness that cannot be satisfied by more. Presence dissolves this sense of lack. When you rest in presence, you recognize that fulfillment is not a distant destination, but an ever-present reality. It is not something you obtain, but something you uncover beneath the surface of your thoughts and emotions. It is the stillness and spaciousness that underlies all experience, the essence of who you are beyond the ego's demands. In presence, you begin to see the difference between fleeting pleasure and deep fulfillment. Pleasure arises from external stimuli and fades quickly. Fulfillment is a deep-rooted sense of peace and contentment that persists regardless of external conditions. This fulfillment is not passive or complacent, but is a dynamic state of being fully alive and awake. When your sense of fulfillment is anchored in presence, your achievements and possessions become expressions of your inner peace rather than attempts to fill a void. You can engage in life's activities with joy and enthusiasm without being attached to outcomes. Success becomes a byproduct of your presence, not its source. This shift changes how you relate to challenges and setbacks as well. When fulfillment depends on external success, obstacles can cause anxiety, fear, or frustration. But when you are rooted in presence, challenges become opportunities to deepen your awareness and to practice acceptance. You remain centered and calm, regardless of what arises. Many people mistake busy activity for meaningful progress, believing that constant doing will bring fulfillment. But the noise of busyness often masks an inner emptiness. Presence invites you to slow down, to listen to the quiet within, and to reconnect with the richness of simply being. It reminds you that your value is not measured by what you do, but by your capacity to be fully present. This does not mean abandoning goals or ambition. Rather, it means engaging with life from a place of grounded presence, where your actions flow naturally from a centered awareness. Your goals become aligned with your true self, and the pursuit of them becomes an expression of joy rather than a desperate attempt to prove worth. The realization that lasting fulfillment arises from presence invites a profound transformation. It shifts the focus from seeking fulfillment outside to uncovering it within. It invites you to rest in the present moment, to let go of attachments to past and future, and to awaken to the peace that is always accessible. Presence is the foundation for genuine happiness and contentment. It is the source of a quiet joy that does not depend on changing circumstances. When you cultivate this awareness, you begin to experience life in a new way, with openness, gratitude, and a deep sense of ease. The path to lasting fulfillment is not found in accumulation or achievement, but in the simple act of being present, fully and consciously, with whatever is here and now. In this presence, you discover a richness that surpasses anything the mind can imagine or create. Acceptance is often misunderstood as resignation or passivity, but it is far more profound and transformative than that. True acceptance is a deep, conscious recognition of life as it is, without adding mental resistance or judgment. It is the willingness to meet reality exactly where it stands, without trying to push it away, control it, or change it immediately. This quality of acceptance is essential because it dissolves the inner friction that creates suffering. The human mind has a natural tendency to resist what is. When something happens that does not fit with our desires or expectations, resistance arises. This resistance often takes the form of mental complaining, frustration, anger, or denial. The ego clings to its preferred version of reality and fights against anything that threatens it. But this very resistance is what magnifies pain and prolongs suffering. When you resist life, you create a conflict within yourself. You are holding on to an idea of how things should be, while reality is showing up differently. This internal struggle generates tension, anxiety, and even despair. The more you resist, the more suffering you experience, because resistance blocks the natural flow of life. Acceptance does not mean you approve or like every circumstance. It does not mean giving up or not taking action when necessary. Rather, acceptance is the acknowledgement of what is present in this moment, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, without adding a layer of mental judgment. It is a simple yes to the reality of now. When you practice acceptance, you open the door to peace. The moment you stop fighting what is, the energy that was used in resistance is freed. This energy can then be used in more creative, effective ways. Acceptance creates spaciousness within, allowing you to respond to life with clarity and calmness instead of reactivity. Suffering is often amplified by the stories we tell ourselves about life's events. These stories are the mental narratives that say, "This shouldn't be happening," or "It's unfair," or "I can't handle this." The ego identifies strongly with these stories because they reinforce its sense of separation and victimhood. But these stories are not reality, they are interpretations, and they are optional. When you practice true acceptance, you begin to see beyond these stories. You learn to separate the facts of a situation from the mental drama that usually surrounds it. You notice that while you cannot always control what happens to you, you can control your relationship to what happens. You can choose acceptance over resistance. Acceptance also transforms how you experience emotions. Emotions arise naturally in response to life, and it is natural to want to avoid pain or discomfort. But when you accept your emotions without judgment, you allow them to flow through you without being trapped in them. This flow prevents emotional buildup, which often leads to deeper suffering. Resistance often creates a cycle of suffering where negative emotions feed the mind's negative stories, and those stories in turn fuel more emotional turmoil. Acceptance interrupts this cycle. By being present with whatever arises, you break free from the mental patterns that trap you. It is important to understand that acceptance is a practice, not a one-time event. It requires mindfulness, the conscious awareness of what is happening inside and outside of you. Sometimes acceptance feels natural and easy, and other times it feels difficult or even impossible. Yet, every moment offers an opportunity to practice it. Through acceptance, you come into alignment with the natural flow of life. You stop pushing against the current and instead learn to move with it. This does not mean passivity or complacency, but a deeper trust in the unfolding of life and your capacity to navigate it. Acceptance also fosters compassion for yourself and for others. When you accept life's imperfections and challenges as part of the human experience, you soften your judgments and cultivate empathy. This compassion brings healing and connection, replacing isolation and conflict. When resistance dissolves, you find a deeper sense of freedom. You no longer lie trapped in mental battles or emotional turmoil. Instead, you experience a calm clarity that allows you to engage with life fully and authentically. This freedom is the foundation for lasting peace and fulfillment. Often, the greatest growth comes through acceptance. When you face life's difficulties without resistance, you access inner strength and wisdom that were previously hidden. You learn that beneath the surface of challenge lies an opportunity for transformation. Practicing acceptance does not mean ignoring injustice, pain, or suffering in the world. It means holding a space of inner peace even amidst external chaos. This inner peace becomes a powerful source of resilience and clarity that can guide your actions in the world. By cultivating acceptance, you begin to see that suffering is not caused by life itself, but by your resistance to it. When you release resistance, you free yourself from unnecessary suffering and open to the deeper joy and peace that are always available. Living beyond the ego is not a distant goal to be reached someday. It is a way of being that becomes possible the moment you learn to embrace the present moment fully and without judgment. The ego is rooted in separation, the idea that you are a separate self, defined by your thoughts, your roles, your possessions, and your past or future. It thrives on comparison, resistance, and mental noise. But when you turn your attention deeply into the now, the ego's grip begins to loosen. and a profound freedom emerges. The present moment is the only reality there is. The past exists only as memory, and the future exists only as imagination. Yet most of the mind's activity is consumed by either revisiting the past or worrying about the future. This tendency keeps you trapped in mental stories and identities that reinforce the ego's sense of self. By constantly living outside of the now, the ego maintains its power. When you fully bring your awareness into the present moment, you begin to see that the ego's narratives lose their hold. The worries, fears, and judgments that usually dominate your mind begin to fade into the background. What remains is a clarity and peace that is timeless. The present moment, experienced without judgment, reveals the simplicity and beauty of life as it is, beyond the ego's distortions. Embracing the present moment without judgment means allowing experience to be exactly as it is, without labeling it as good or bad, right or wrong. It means dropping the mental habit of categorizing and reacting and instead meeting life with openness and curiosity. This non-judgmental presence is a powerful way to step beyond the ego, which depends on constant evaluation and comparison to sustain itself. Judgment creates division within yourself and between you and the world. It separates experience into categories of approval and disapproval, creating conflict and resistance. The ego thrives on these divisions because they reinforce its sense of identity as a separate, special self. But when you release judgment and meet experience as it is, you dissolve these divisions and touch the unity underlying all things. Living fully in the present without judgment also means embracing whatever arises within you, your thoughts, emotions, sensations, without trying to suppress or change them. The ego often reacts to discomfort or unpleasant feelings by pushing them away or distracting itself. But true presence invites you to stay with whatever is happening, even if it is difficult. In this staying, a natural healing and transformation occur. This willingness to be with life as it unfolds is the foundation of freedom beyond the ego. When you stop resisting what is, you stop feeding the ego's need to defend, control, and protect itself. You step into a more authentic self, one that is not defined by mental patterns or conditioned responses, but by openness, awareness, and acceptance. Living beyond the ego does not mean denying the practicalities of life or ignoring your responsibilities. It means engaging with life from a place of centered presence, where your actions are not driven by fear, anxiety, or the need for approval. Instead, your responses arise spontaneously from clarity and compassion. This presence enhances your relationships, your creativity, and your sense of purpose. As you practice living in the present moment without judgment, you begin to notice a shift in how you experience time. Time no longer feels like a burden or a pressure to be somewhere else. Instead, it becomes a flow, a continuous unfolding of now moments. Each moment contains the fullness of life, complete and whole in itself. The ego often attempts to cling to the past or grasp at the future in an effort to maintain control or avoid pain. But presence teaches you that control is an illusion and that real power lies in your ability to meet life as it is, here and now. This power comes from surrender, not a surrender born of weakness, but one born of wisdom and trust. In the stillness of presence, you also discover a connection to something greater than the individual self. The boundaries that the ego constructs between you and others begin to dissolve. You sense the interconnectedness of all beings and the unity that underlies the diversity of forms. This sense of oneness deepens your compassion and reduces the ego's urge to dominate or compete. The more you practice embracing the present moment fully and without judgment, the more natural it becomes to live beyond the ego's limitations. The mind's chatter quiets, and you rest more frequently in the stillness of awareness. From this place, you act with greater wisdom, patience, and love. It is important to remember that living beyond the ego is not about achieving perfection or escaping the challenges of life. The ego will continue to arise and attempt to reassert itself. But with each moment of presence, you strengthen your ability to recognize the ego's patterns and choose not to engage with them. This ongoing practice of presence without judgment transforms your experience of yourself and the world. You begin to live with a lightness and ease that comes from knowing you are not your thoughts, your fears, or your stories. You live as the awareness in which all these things arise and pass away. Compassion is not something that can be forced or manufactured through effort. It arises naturally when you begin to see others not as separate entities but as expressions of the same consciousness that underlies your own being. When the veil of ego dissolves, the boundaries between self and other become less rigid, and a deep sense of connection emerges. This connection is the fertile ground from which true compassion blooms. The ego creates a sense of separation, an I that is distinct from you, and them it builds walls of judgment, comparison and competition, reinforcing the illusion that others are fundamentally different or opposed to us. This separation often breeds fear, misunderstanding, and indifference, which block the flow of compassion. But when you begin to recognize the shared essence beneath these surface distinctions, a profound shift occurs. Seeing others as expressions of the same consciousness means perceiving beyond their external form, personality, or behavior. It is the recognition that beneath the individual differences lies the same life force, the same awareness, the same desire for happiness and freedom from suffering. This recognition invites empathy because you begin to understand that everyone is navigating their own struggles, pain, and joy. Compassion arises as a natural response to this shared humanity. It is not a pity that looks down on others, but a heartfelt understanding that we are all interconnected. This understanding softens the heart and opens it to care and kindness. Compassion moves beyond intellectual sympathy to a deep emotional resonance with the experiences of others. When compassion arises from this place of shared consciousness, it is unconditional. It does not depend on whether someone meets certain criteria or behaves in a way you approve of. It is not selective or transactional. True compassion embraces others just as they are, recognizing their intrinsic worth and dignity. This compassionate awareness transforms how you relate to others. Instead of reacting with judgment, criticism, or indifference, you respond with patience, understanding, and generosity. This does not mean you condone harmful actions or accept injustice passively. Rather, it means approaching situations from a place of calm clarity and love, which allows for more effective and healing responses. Compassion also dissolves the walls within yourself. When you see yourself as part of the same consciousness as others, you naturally extend the same kindness and acceptance inward. You stop harshly judging your own flaws and mistakes, and you nurture yourself with the same gentle care you offer to others. This self-compassion is essential for authentic compassion because it grounds your kindness in truth rather than idealism. As your compassion deepens, you begin to perceive the interconnectedness of all life more clearly. You realize that the suffering of one affects the whole, just as the joy of one enriches the collective. This sense of unity inspires a commitment to act with care, not only toward individual beings, but toward the environment and all forms of life. The practice of compassion rooted in shared consciousness can transform conflicts and difficulties. When you understand that the person you are struggling with is not an enemy but a fellow traveler on the path of life, your approach changes. You become less defensive and more open to dialogue and reconciliation. Compassion becomes a bridge that connects differences rather than a barrier that divides. This awakening to shared consciousness and compassion often arises spontaneously in moments of stillness and presence. When the mind quiets and the ego's grip loosens, the heart opens naturally. It is not a state that must be forced, but one that can be nurtured through mindfulness, self-awareness, and loving presence. Compassion born from this deeper awareness also carries a healing power. It can soothe wounds caused by isolation, judgment. It fosters forgiveness, not only toward others, but toward yourself. Forgiveness is an extension of compassion that frees you from the burden of resentment and opens space for peace. When compassion flows naturally, your life takes on new meaning and depth. Acts of kindness become expressions of your true nature rather than obligations or strategies. Your relationships deepen and flourish because they are based on genuine understanding and respect. The more you cultivate this compassionate awareness, the more it influences every aspect of your life. Your thoughts become kinder, your words more gentle, and your actions more mindful. This transformation radiates outward, touching everyone you meet and contributing to a more peaceful and loving world. Ultimately, compassion rooted in the recognition of shared consciousness dissolves the illusion of separation and reveals the unity beneath diversity. It is the flowering of the heart that occurs when the ego's boundaries fall away and you awaken to the interconnectedness of all beings.